Well, again, Ann, thank you very much for having us here today, and thanks to the Chamber on two accounts. Number one, what I have found is I've been around the country, and well, literally around the world, but around the country and around my state, and I talk about cybersecurity. Until 6 or 8 months ago, if I was at a Rotary Club and I said, guys, the most important thing we got to deal with is cybersecurity, everybody's eyes would glaze over. This is not what I, as a lawyer, refer to as a road wreck case. You can't see what's happening out there. You can't really feel it, except that now people are starting to understand that this is serious, that it has huge financial consequences, not just to the economy of the United States, but to me personally. So what you're doing today is helping educate people about this, and I am very thankful for that. Secondly, the support of the Chamber is key. I ran into a former DNI just last Thursday. We had a cybersecurity conference in Augusta, Georgia, and former Director Mike McConnell was there, and we were talking about the bill, and he said, Sax, where does the Chamber stand? I said, the Chamber is absolutely fully behind us. He said, great, I think your chances just improved significantly. So to all of you, thanks for your willingness to let us have a chance to dialogue with you on this. I want to echo what Diane said. Number one, you're going to think this is a mutual admiration society, and it is. She and I have had a great working relationship, and it's proof that Democrats and Republicans can check their political hats at the door every now and then and do what's in the best interest of the country. Diane and I have done that on a number of issues when it comes to national security. And I am so glad to have her in the foxhole when we're fighting these battles, whether it's in the airwaves or on the ground. And she's been a great leader and a great friend in the process. As Diane said, we had a cybersecurity bill on the floor of the Senate a couple of years ago. There were competing factions that didn't allow that bill to generate more than 56 votes. And what she and I did after that, we were involved in the process, but actually we were kind of fighting each other on the bill. But we both knew the importance of the issue. So when that bill went down, she and I sat down together and said, look, this is foolish. We know how important the issue is. We've got to come up with a bill that's bipartisan, that you and I can agree on, and that we can get a majority of our committee to agree on. It's not easy. As she said, in these times on Capitol Hill, seeing bipartisanship is somewhat of an anomaly. But Diane and I slugged it out. We did make the right kind of compromises on positions without compromising our principles to come together on this bill. They received a 12-3 vote coming out of committee. You don't see many 12-3 votes coming out of any committee on the Senate side these days. That was going into the election too, by the way. What my priorities in this bill were was, number one, to make sure that we had a bill that was going to provide John and our other law enforcement and our government agencies the tools that they need to make sure that they're able to detect intrusions onto any system, be it public or private, and to make sure that they had the ability to share that information both from a public to private standpoint as well as a private to private standpoint, because if we don't do that, we're not accomplishing anything. And we wanted to do that in a voluntary system. If we mandate to the private sector, you will do this way, there's always going to be pushback from the private sector. And with the level of trust that exists today between the public sector and the private sector, we knew that our chances of success long-term were not going to be very good. So what we did was go to your companies, go to the private sector and say, okay, we want your ideas. We want you to help us start on the ground floor, and let's build this building called a cybersecurity bill. And we did that, and we have been able to incorporate good ideas from the public sector, good ideas from the private sector, and I think we accomplished what we set out to do from a voluntary system. Secondly, it's imperative that we incorporate strong privacy measures in this bill. We simply can't allow someone's personal information to be shared on a wholesale basis. We agreed on that, and we think we've come up with good language to ensure that that does not happen. Thirdly, it's important that we put language in this bill that allows flexibility. This is not a short-term project from our standpoint. This is long-term, and with the way that the technology changes in the world of cyber on virtually an hourly basis, not a daily basis, we want to make sure that 10 years from now that there's flexibility in the legislative language that allows the public sector and the private sector to make the necessary changes to adjust to what technology comes forward in the intervening time frame. And then lastly, I'll say that, again, another key aspect of this, if it's going to work, is to ensure that there is liability protection given to the private sector. We think we've done that in the right way, and we think that the private sector, those folks who are involved in it, as well as I hope, as Diane said, I hope all of you will read the bill. I think when you do, you'll be like the folks in the private sector that we had involved in it. You'll have some comfort in knowing that in the corporate boardroom, people are going to say, wow, if we share this information with our competitor, we're going to have protection, and we're going to be able to do this in a way that lets us put the right kinds of countermeasures in place without the fear of liability from outside sources. So I'm pleased about this bill. Obviously, Diane has a lot more influence on Senator Reid than I do, but I have implored him that if there is one piece of legislation that needs to be concluded between now and the end of the year, this is it. If we don't do it this year, I fear that it'll be at least another year before it rises back to the level that it is now. And if we wait another year, we are really risking the economy of the United States, in my opinion. So I'm very hopeful that when we get back here in a couple of weeks that Senator Reid is going to agree with us. We'll have this bill on the floor. We'll slug it out. Diane and I are joined at the hip on this. We're going to be together, and if somebody's got an amendment that makes the bill better, we're okay. If it's a bill that just tries to send a political message of some sort, then we're going to work to beat it back. But I do hope we get the bill on the floor and we see the Senate work in the way that the Senate historically has worked to provide good legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. I think you're saying all the things we like to hear: liability protections, flexibility. I'll tell you that Admiral Rogers was here for lunch, the cyber commander, NSA director. He's very big on the information sharing bill as well, and he said the same thing that you did. He doesn't want personal identifiable information. He doesn't want to get into those privacy issues. So I think that information is sharing. We talked earlier, this is something we've been talking about for a decade or so now. And I guess I have to ask, to put you on the spot, but what are our chances with this bill in the lame duck session? You know, do you think we have a chance?
Well, I do think we have a chance. I think it depends on people in this room and a lot of rooms like it throughout America. I look back 3 years, and both Saxby and I sat down with the chamber then when you had some concerns about the bill, and it was really useful. I think I went to 3 or 4 big meetings, and I really came to understand what those concerns were. I think those have been remedied in this bill. This bill isn't the sun, the moon, and the stars. It isn't a regulatory guideline how-to. It's a voluntary bill. It allows the voluntary sharing of information with each other or the government with immunity from lawsuits, essentially. And I think that's critical. It's a first step bill. It's the first thing we need to do. Now, here's my worry. Saxby, if we don't get this bill passed now, with your retiring, I think you're right. We go back to the year dot. We're going to have all the arguments we've already had and disposed of, but with a new cast of characters, and companies are going to continue to get hit. So you and I, because of what we see, share a big sense of alacrity that we need to get this thing done. We really need others to stand up and say, yes, we're in support with this. We oppose the last bill. We're for this bill. Let's get to it. Let's pass it.
And well, one other thing, too, I think, Ann, that gives us the potential to get this bill done. The White House came out with their executive order virtually a year ago. I was frankly very apprehensive when they said they were going to issue an executive order because I didn't know what it was going to say, even though they had talked with both of us about it in advance. But frankly, the lay of the land that was put forward in that executive order is very positive in concert with what we've done in our bill. And some standards are being set by NIST, and NIST has incorporated the private sector into their discussions. That is good, and there's some other things that are being done there that I think lays the groundwork to some of the solving some of the objections that were in the Lieberman-Collins bill. And we focused on information sharing, which is the guts of it, obviously. If you don't have information sharing, it's not going to work. But I think that the White House needs to be commended for laying out the executive order the way they have. And I've commended NIST publicly, and I'll continue to do so about the job that they're doing.
We at the Chamber would certainly agree with you. We had Michael Daniel here, the White House Cyber Coordinator, this morning. When he first came out with the executive order, he was here at the Chamber a couple of times, which is unheard of to shop around an executive order like that. So I think that the extent he went to get not buy-in, but situational awareness from the private sector on the executive order was very helpful. I will tell you that the NIST cyber framework is something that the Chamber fully supports. We're doing a roadshow around the country, socializing it with smaller, medium-sized companies. So we agree with you, sir, that this cyber framework and the executive order was a step in the right direction.
I think, Ann, if I may, I think if we can get this up on the floor, I believe we can pass it. You can't pass a bill that isn't bipartisan, and this one is, and I think we can. And both Saxby and I work closely with Mike Rogers, the House Chair, Dutch Ruppersberger, the Vice Chairman, and Mike has said, we're ready to go. If you get a bill, we'll sit down, we'll get a conference, and we'll get it done right away. So you really don't want to wait until the legislative bodies change on this, because then you've got to go back to year dot and start all over again. And that means inordinate delay. So I really hope that we can get people to stand up, Saxby and Ann, and come forward and say, you got to do this and do it now. We're happy to make the bill language available. I think it is already, and our staffs are here. They're happy to sit down with you, or we can as well. But we really need the help to get it passed.
And I'll just say, both of your staffs have been just terrific to work with, so I appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
We'll take a few questions from the floor. And we are having a very hard time seeing you out there with these bright lights, so please wait for a microphone to come to you. Let's try to get the Chamber members first, if we may.
Hi, I'm Corey Bennett with The Hill. You discussed a lot of the ways that will get the bill passed. Oh. Hi, over here, that could get the bill passed in the lame duck session. What perhaps are some of the things that might be a stumbling block and might prevent it from getting passed in this upcoming session?
Well, let me be candid. There were essentially two categories of people that had concerns. One were trial lawyers. We think we've worked that out, and that there aren't problems there now, cross my fingers. The other is the privacy community, which is a big, broad community. And I think we've made another 6 changes that we've agreed to. But, it's always more. Now, I think, if the bill comes to the floor, and obviously we have a set time and a number of amendments, we're willing to take amendments and do them on the floor. So that shouldn't stop it. But those are really the two groups that we have concerns about. And I think one of them will be settled. And with respect to the privacy community, what I've heard is, well, we wanted the old bill. Well, the old bill got exactly one Republican vote on the floor. That's not a good message if you want to pass something. So you have to find a way to work together to get it done, and we believe we've done that.
And that wasn't my vote. This one will get my vote.
Other questions, comments? Over here?
Hi, Chris Castelli with Inside Cybersecurity. This morning, Coordinator Michael Daniel was talking about how he's working very closely with you on legislation. Where does the White House stand on the bill today, and do you think they're supportive enough?
Well, I can quickly speak as the chairman. What we have done is kept the White House advised. The staff has done this. They've sat down, they've worked with the White House, and I think unless there's something that's new that I don't know about, there's been a relatively close working relationship. Do you want to comment on that?
And this is, it's not been a one-sided conversation. I've had direct conversation with the president. I even rode with him in a golf cart one day, and we talked about it in the golf cart as we were trying to focus on our game. We were more importantly focused on cybersecurity that day.
I'm not so sure.
But we've had any number of conversations with the White House on it, and I'm not about to speak for them, but we have taken their original concerns into consideration, and we know that the president's got to sign whatever bill comes out, and we're going to continue to dialogue, and I'm hoping that by the time we get back, and assuming Senator Reid says, yes, this is something we need to do, that the White House will come out and be a strong advocate with us. Is it a perfect bill? I mean, all of us know, particularly those of you that have been around the Senate for a long time, nothing's ever perfect. And that's the way you get votes, and the way you get things done is to craft something that, while it can always be improved, and as Diane said, particularly in an area like this is the first step. Who knows where we're going to be a year from now, but if we do nothing, shame on us, and I know the White House feels strongly about that aspect of it.
And for those of you that may not be so in the weeds as we are here at the Chamber on this bill, we're talking about 2588. This is the CISA bill, Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act of 2014. And a little summary that we put together is that this bill represents a workable compromise among many stakeholders. It also safeguards privacy, as you have discussed, protects civil liberties, preserves the role of civilian and intelligence agencies, and incentivizes sharing with narrow liability protections. And it would also help businesses achieve timely and actionable situational awareness, which is the key to what we're talking about. That information sharing in real time is what we need. So I just want to point out it. You have this in your folders. We've got 16 organizations along with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce now in support of this bill.
Great.
So very supportive of it. We've got a question over here, Matthew.
Ann, thank you. Matthew with the Chamber. Senators, I wanted to thank you very much for your work on the bill and the work of your staff members who have done a very, very good job in terms of working with us on aspects of the bill. One thing that might not be well known is the bill does mandate that businesses sharing information with peers in government have to remove PII. They have to remove personal information. Maybe you can hear me better now. They have to remove PII. The bill says you must remove PII. I think that's one of the elements of the bill we didn't originally agree with, primarily because we thought that smaller and mid-sized businesses that aren't as sophisticated in terms of doing the removal might say, you know what, instead of sharing, I'm going to sit this one out. But we recognize that that is a big issue, and that one element of the bill that we've found it necessary to compromise around. You might be interested to know that we have been meeting with many, many offices in the Senate to try to educate them about the bill. It is our #1 cyber legislative priority. So I wanted to just thank you and say, yes, if you do have a chance, and we have an opportunity to pass the bill on the floor, please urge Senator Reid to put it on the floor. We think the bill deserves at least a shot at a vote. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
You know, one thing we did to address early on privacy concerns was with regard to the definition of cyber indicator threats. And we narrowed the definition of it. and the focus is on really the serious issue of cyber threats, and it's not able to be expanded from a privacy standpoint into non-cyber issues, which I understand from a privacy standpoint. So that was another big compromise that we came together on, and Diana whipped me again on it.
No, this is how...
But that's the way things get done, and I empathize with the rationale and the reasoning behind it, and that's why we were able to make the changes that we were able to make on both sides. And thank you for your comments and your input. I mean, when the chamber has input, you speak for a myriad of sectors of the economy as well as individual businesses, and that's critically important to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Saxby. He gave you a little inside information, and just want to say thank you. Didn't have to do that. Appreciate it.
Any last questions, comments? I can't. Nope, one back there.
To what extent is the debate of surveillance reform in the lame duck going to play into the ability to pass this bill? You know, I've heard both that surveillance reform is necessary to this bill, but also could be a death knell for this bill because they don't want them to get sort of inextricably linked. So how do you guys plan to navigate that in the lame duck?
Does surveillance reform have to pass first? Before
Well, I'll kick that off. You're talking about the FISA reform bill, and how does it relate to the potential for discussion and debate on this bill? The thing about FISA reform is that we don't need it between now and the end of the year. We've got a bill. That bill expires the middle of next year. We don't know who's going to control Congress, but this has been a vigorous debate as to the changes that need to be made in FISA, and I think there's a lot of accord on that, but that's not something that urgently needs to be done between now and the end of the year simply because we've got laws on the book today that deal with that issue. Cyber, we don't. And there should not be any connection between the two, and I certainly hope that's not the debate we get into or not the position that we get into when we get back into session.
Well, let me say this. You've hit on something because I've heard this in roundabout ways, that FISA reform has to come first. And as I understand the current status, the House has passed a bill, which was very difficult for the House to pass a bill. We have passed a bill on certain FISA reforms that went out of our committee, I think 11-4. The President has a distinct view on this, and that is that he supports the House-passed bill. And Senator Leahy, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, is putting together a FISA bill that would essentially echo the House bill with a few changes in it. One having to do with the public advocate / amicus, and also with a couple of other things. Here is the big problem, and the problem is how do we get something done there? The vice chairman has said quite correctly, well, this doesn't really need to come up until next year, but that's a long time to wait, and my concern is that we do need to do something there. I don't think it's necessary to put the FISA bill first. Our bill is ready to go. It can pass the Senate. I think at the very least it would show that we can pass something. We can get it conferenced. We can get it back before the Senate for a final vote, and we can get it to the President. So if we can do this with not a great deal of debate, probably with a joint rule between the two sides that there be a couple of hours for debate and a limited number of amendments, and then get it passed and then conference it, so we could get something done. And I very much hope that that will happen.
We hope so too. We have time for one more question if there's anyone out there. I can't see.
Calm
There's
group
one here in the
today.
middle.
Hi, my name is Jason Geske from Senator Mark Kirk's office, and I wanted to ask you, Senator Chambliss, who will hold the banner for information sharing in the next Congress for Republicans? Who has that kind of institutional knowledge of working with the chamber, but also these issues when you leave the Senate?
Well, the most senior person in line to me is Senator Burr. He will, I'm sure, be the next Republican to either be chairman or vice chairman. Behind him is Senator Risch, and we got Senator Coates, Senator Rubio, Senator Collins. We're losing Senator Coburn, so there's a lot of Republican experience that'll be coming back, and I'm confident that whoever it is going to work diligently with Diane to move something. But as we both alluded to earlier, we've got lots of new members off the Intel Committee that are coming back and trying to, or coming in and trying to educate those folks about the issue itself. Plus, there are a lot of members that simply look to Diane, to me, and other senior members of the committee to basically have some security in from the standpoint of knowing a complex issue, having worked on a complex issue. They're willing to go with us. And we've got a lot of folks who are going to be coming in that are not going to be in that position. So that's why I think, and obviously Diane agrees with me, that it's going to be a long time if we don't get it done by the end of this year. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you. And I think that's one of the things that we want to work with you on, that educating of the new members or to the committee, and we're happy to continue to do that. I want to thank you both for coming here today. Thank you for all the work you've done on this bill. It's a terrific bill. Again, we enjoy working with you and your staffs, both of you. Thank you very much. And the Chamber is going to continue to push for this bill. So
Good.
thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.